What's up, everybody? Welcome back. I'm Abe, and this is EVE Online, and we are talking about ship fitting. And specifically, with this video, let's talk about mid-slots. So, we've talked in the past about how the mid-slots are sort of focused towards shield tanking and navigation or E-war. So, on this battleship, which I'm using as sort of a talking point, generally, so, I've got an afterburner on here. If it's a large ship, if you don't have a prop mod or a propulsion modifier, like an afterburner or micro warp drive, your speed's going to be really slow. And the bigger the ship, the slower you go. So generally, most fits of a lot of ships, especially at least in PvE, I can't speak to PvP. I'm not an expert at anything really, but I've got most of my time spent doing PvE. So most times in PvE, you'll see one propulsion mod, just to make it so you can, go a somewhat reasonable speed if you need to get from point A to point B. Navigating pockets and mission areas is, it's made more difficult when you only travel at like 80 meters per second. So all right, so you've got your propulsion. There are target painters, which we talked about before, which make your enemy easier to target, easier to hit, easier to track. It just increases their signature radius, so it makes a smaller ship look like and act like a bigger ship as far as your weapons are concerned, which really helps with missiles and also to a lesser extent, I think, with other weapon types as well. You've got things that impact your targeting, whether it's increasing your targeting range or your optimal range or just your defense against target e-warfare. I'm blanking right now, but people can reduce your ability to target, and so it increases your targeting strength. But then when you get into shield tanking, like what does that involve? So shield tanking, and I guess I should have talked about this with armor tanking, but the same thing basically applies. Let's unfit this and go looking for passive shield modules. So as with armor, and we can actually do this with both, just to use it as an example. Here we go. So shield hardeners are active modules. So you have to turn them on, and they use up your capacitor. So let me turn off this micro jump drive and my afterburner. All right, so we've got our missile launchers here. They're using up some capacitor, but not much. None at all, really. So once we turn these on, you can see it's starting to use our capacitor. And what they do is you have active modules that increase your resistances across all types of damage, whether it's EM, thermal, kinetic, or explosive. And in the shield sense, this is an adaptive invulnerability field, and you can either get Tech 1 or Tech 2 versions of that. And there are stacking bonuses, or stacking penalties, so diminishing returns for using multiples. But you can see here 30% across the board, 30% across the board. You can get them where they're specific. So an EM ward field is 55%. So if I turned this off and I turned that off, I've got 71% versus 39%. So I turn that one on, boom, I get a huge boost. So this allows you to cater your tank to whatever you're going up against, right? So if something's going to be doing entirely EM damage, you want to use things like this EM ward field. But this is an active module, and as you can see, if I choose to use 3, I've already used up a quarter of my overall available capacitor. Sorry. Now, those are shield hardeners, and those are active modules. And then there are also resistance amplifiers, which are passive modules. So instead of this, which gives you negative 55% and it uses your capacitor, there's a ward amplifier, which is this object here. Not quite as strong, but let's turn these off here. All right, so 39%, if we turn that on, it's at 60 compared to this one, which takes you to 71. So the active module is more effective than the passive, but as an exercise, you can see that, if we were going to use both, right, neither of them, 39% is where we're at. If we turn this passive one on, it's at 60. With just the EM ward field, it's at 71. And if you combine the two, it's at 79. It doesn't seem like it should be a minor 8% bump, but it is. So there are passive modules which you can use, and they don't offer as good of protection, but they also spare your capacitor. So this is something to consider and use more readily when you're having capacitor issues, right? Or especially if your weapons, like lasers, use your capacitor as well. So this is also the case for armor tanking. So let's turn these off. We'll turn that off, and let's go down and look at armor. So for the low slots, and I know this is getting a little bit out of the wheelhouse, but for the low slots, if we come up and look at armor, there are the same basic, why am I not seeing? There we go. There are armor hardeners, which, if we look at the EM, is an activated ability. Also, you can see the same basic percentage as the other one, 55%. And then there's also, is it energized plating? I think it is. Resistance plating. That's probably it. And if we look at the Tech 2 version of that, that's 26% versus 55. Right? So 58 to 69. Like there's active and passive, and it's things to keep in mind. And if you want the multiple, if you want like the similarity to adaptive invulnerability field, you can get into an energized adaptive nanomembrane, which gives you 20% across the board, which seems like less, but that's just kind of the way armor works. So to go back to mids, and a lot of this, as I talk about sort of shield tanking, can also be applied to armor tanking. So if we go back into shield, in addition to just adding and playing with your resistances, you can add items that make your shields bigger. So right now I've got a base of 8,400 shields. If I add a large shield extender, 8,400, I add a second one, 8,400 turns into 14,600, which is, almost twice, right? So you can add shield to it. You can add things that actively regenerate your shields. So let's say we get an extra large, not the ancillary one. Let's Clarity Ward Booster, just to grab one. And this provides 596 hit points regenerated every 5 seconds, or basically 120 per second. So all of your tanking can be managed in a variety of different ways. You can play with your resistances. You can increase the amount of sort of base tank that you have, whether it's increasing the amount of shields you have, increasing the amount of armor that's there. You can repair the armor, or you can boost the shield and repair that. You can put modules on that make the boosting or the repairing even more effective. And there's just like a litany of ways to use these slots, but this is how you manage your tanking. So I guess more than a mid-slot introspective, this has turned into a tanking introspective, but it's important to understand what all you can do with your ship and why people are using things like this. So if I want to, build this ship out, generally speaking, you don't want to combine active and passive modules, but sometimes people do. So let's say I'm building out a mission ship. I'm going to encounter quite a bit of damage. So I'm going to, this is a little bit overkill, but okay, I'm going to encounter EM damage primarily, but secondarily thermal. And so, okay, I'm going to use 2 adaptive invulnerability fields, an EM ward field, and this extra large clarity ward booster. But maybe I want my booster to work better, so then I'm going to use a boost amplifier, which, if we look at it, it adds 36% to the boost that this thing is providing. So instead of 596, now it's 811, right? And that does quite a bit for me. So then I turn on my afterburner and I'm trying to get away, and I'm only going to be able to do all of these things for a minute. Right? So, but it allows you to tailor kind of what you're doing and to provide a lot of tank. Effectively, my hit points now are 64,000, and that's not bad. So, and then just to let's look at here, phase, scope, target painter. I don't know, just to put something else on there. So those are the mid slots. Webifiers, warp scramblers and disruptors, target painters, largely shield tanking and all of the accoutrements that go along with it. You've got the afterburner, you've got your warp, your micro warp drives, your micro jump drives, and all of your exploration stuff. So except for the probe launcher, your relic analyzer, your data analyzer, all of the tools that you will use, your cargo scanners, all of that stuff is going to go into your mid slot. Now, what if you're a drone? What if you use drones? Well, let's see. So there are drone damage amplifiers, which we talked about, which go in the mid slots. And there are drone link augmentors, which I believe go, oh no, those are high. Navigation computer. There we go, mid. So drones have things you can put in the lows, mids, and highs as well to increase your damage or capabilities. And in the mids, you can increase their maximum velocity. In the lows, you can, I think I mentioned this before, you can increase their damage. And if you use one of these link augmentors up in the top, which we'll get into later in a different video, you can increase the range at which you're able to control your drones. So mid slots, as with low, are very versatile, and you just kind of need to understand generally what goes into each of those and how you can use those. So this just gives you a glimpse. I'm not telling you how you should do it, but things to think about. So that's mid slots. If you have questions, and I'm sure you do, this was not my best explanation as we got down into the weeds a little bit, but maybe the weeds helped you some. By all means, hit me up in the comments with questions. The only reason we're doing this is because somebody asked questions, and they were very good questions, and so it warranted, making some videos and trying to help him out, and hopefully these help you out as well. So thank you for watching, and in the next video we'll get into highs and rigs. There isn't a lot of nuance in highs as there is in mids and lows, but there is in the rigs, so we'll get all that together. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.